Part 1. A Whisper in the Dark. The sound was faint, like a breeze slipping through the cracks of our old Victorian house in Savannah. But it wasn't the wind that stirred me awake. It was a voice. His voice. I blinked into the darkness, the shadows of our bedroom stretching long and still across the floor. Beside me, the sheets were cold. Graham wasn't there. For a split second, I thought maybe he was in the bathroom. But then I heard it again, murmured words, low and controlled, drifting in from the hallway. She still has no idea why we're so close. My chest tightened. I sat up slowly, careful not to make the bed creak. The hallway light was off, but moonlight spilled through the cracked door just enough for me to see a sliver of Graham's silhouette. Phone pressed to his ear, standing still like a man who didn't want to be overheard. I stepped out, my bare feet making no sound against the hardwood floor. I moved closer. Yeah, she hasn't caught on. 1 more week, Ilona. That's all I need. Ilona? I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The name hit me like a slap. I didn't know anyone named Ilona. Certainly not someone my husband should be talking to after midnight. And definitely not in that tone. She won't fight it. She doesn't even look at the bank statements. That one stung. I staggered back a step, barely catching myself against the wall. He was talking about me, calmly, strategically, like I was a problem to be managed, a pawn to be moved. I didn't hear the rest. My mind was screaming too loud. My stomach churned. I turned around and slipped back into the bedroom, diving under the covers just seconds before Graham returned. I kept my breathing slow, pretending to be asleep. The mattress shifted as he climbed in beside me, sighing softly like nothing had happened. His hand brushed against my arm. I didn't move. Bathroom, he muttered into the darkness, as if offering a preemptive excuse. I didn't answer. I lay awake for hours, eyes wide, heart racing. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the kitchen. Graham was whistling, like the night before hadn't happened. He wore that old gray Henley I used to love, sleeves pushed up, coffee already brewed. "Morning, babe," he said with a kiss on my cheek. "Sleep okay?" I nodded, my mouth dry. Fine. I waited until he left for the gym before grabbing my laptop and opening our bank portal. I had never needed to. Graham handled most of the finances. I trusted him. Idiot. The numbers loaded slowly. My eyes scanned the recent activity. $1,000 to Merit Consulting, $850 at some vague shell company in Tampa, $2,500 wired to a personal account labeled only GW2. At first glance, they looked harmless, but there were dozens of small withdrawals, frequent, calculated, all within the past 90 days. It wasn't the money that scared me, it was the pattern. I printed the statements and slipped them into a manila folder. My hands were shaking. When Graham came back, he kissed me on the forehead and asked if I wanted avocado toast. "You okay?" he asked, pouring orange juice. "You look tired." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, didn't sleep well." He shrugged and moved on. His phone buzzed on the counter. He snatched it up before I could see the screen and turned it face down. Again. That night, I didn't sleep either. I watched him, lying next to me like he wasn't planning a war behind my back, and I whispered one name into the dark. Ilona Merritt. The next day, I searched her name online. Nothing came up at first until I adjusted the spelling. Ilona Merritt, licensed financial consultant, corporate strategist, based in Atlanta. There it was, a picture. Young, sharp, too polished. The kind of woman Graham would find professional, his favorite word for women he admired just a little too much. I dug deeper. She had started working with a firm that Graham's practice had partnered with just 3 months ago. The timeline fit too perfectly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something colder, resolve. I made 2 calls. The first was to Clarabelle Fox, my old college roommate and now a no-nonsense estate lawyer with a reputation for annihilating men like Graham. I didn't give her the whole story, yet. I just asked her how fast someone could move assets into a trust. When she asked why, I said, "Because I think my husband is trying to erase me from my own life." The second call was to the bank. That afternoon, I opened 2 new accounts, both under my maiden name. I requested paperless everything, new security pins, and instructed them not to accept any joint access requests under any circumstance. When I got home, Graham was on the phone in his office. The door was closed. I didn't knock. I waited. I watched. And for the first time since we got married 6 years ago, I realized I was married to a man who had never once loved me more than he loved control. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly overhead, and I made a vow to myself. He will not see me fall. He will not take one more thing. I would let him think I was still blind, let him keep whispering to his mistress, let him make his perfect little plans. But I had a plan now, too, and it started with not letting him know I'd already woken up. It happened on a Thursday, one of those oddly quiet afternoons when the air feels too still, like the city itself is holding its breath. Graham came home early, claiming he had a migraine, which was strange. The man could work through the flu, a hangover, even a court loss. Migraines? That wasn't his style, but I didn't question it, not out loud. He collapsed onto this couch and turned on some documentary he'd never normally watch, the volume low, his phone resting on the coffee table, screen down, as always. I sat at the dining table, pretending to scroll through recipes. My eyes, however, kept drifting toward the edge of the phone where the screen glowed every few minutes with incoming notifications. I was waiting for something to slip, and then it did, a soft ding. The phone lit up for half a second, and in that half second, the name burned itself into my memory. Ilona Merritt, and the message preview? Almost done. Just need her to sign. She still thinks this is about taxes. My hand clenched the chair so tight my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just some abstract idea anymore. She was real, tangible, calculated. And they were planning something that hinged on my signature. Graham's voice pulled me out of the freeze. "Babe," he said without turning, "any ideas for dinner?" I stood, forcing my expression into something neutral. "Not yet," I said calmly, moving into the kitchen. Inside, I gripped the counter and took slow, measured breaths. The granite felt ice cold beneath my palms. My mind raced. What did they want me to sign? What had they already set up? I needed more. That night, Graham fell asleep early, or at least pretended to. I waited until his breathing deepened before I grabbed his briefcase. He always kept it in his office, right beside the desk, locked. But that day he must have been sloppy, or maybe overconfident, because it wasn't locked. Inside, nestled between manila folders and court briefs, was a slim red folder labeled Transfer Packet, MQ Assets, my initials. I opened it with trembling hands. The top document was titled Personal Financial Realignment Agreement. Clever wording to mask what it really was. A full transfer of my condo equity, brokerage accounts, and retirement funds into a shared entity, one registered under his firm. I flipped to the back pages. Graham's signature was already there. My line remained blank. A sticky note was attached. Have her sign by Monday. File before quarter close. I am. My stomach flipped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a heist. I quietly closed the folder, slid it back where I found it, and tiptoed out of the office. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but rage. The next morning, Graham was unusually chipper. He made me coffee, kissed the top of my head, and said he wanted to talk through a few things. We sat at the breakfast nook, sun filtering through the blinds, everything pretending to be normal. "I was thinking," he began, "we should really get our financial ducks in a row. Just, in case something ever happens." I nodded slowly, heart thudding. "What kind of something?" "Oh, nothing specific," he said with a soft chuckle. "But like fire, accident, emergency. We've been kind of disorganized, don't you think?" My smile was tight. "I suppose." He sipped his coffee, then leaned forward, sliding a small folder across the table. "Could you look this over sometime today? It's just a simple transfer agreement. Keeps everything tidy." There it was. He watched me carefully, like a predator pretending to be your pet. I took the folder and placed it on the side without opening it. "I'll take a look later." He seemed disappointed, but masked it well. Later that day, while he was out for a late meeting, I scanned the document. Everything I saw the night before was real. There were new details now, an LLC I didn't recognize, one registered in Delaware under a trust labeled Wilder Holdings, his last name. He had created a legal vehicle to absorb my finances. But it wouldn't work. Because what he didn't know was that 2 nights ago, with Clarabelle's help, I had moved every asset I could touch into a revocable trust under my maiden name. The condo, transferred. Savings, closed and reissued under a brand new account. Stocks, liquidated and reallocated into an out-of-state retirement vehicle. Fully legal, fully protected. It wasn't everything. He still didn't know about the private art collection I inherited from my grandmother, stored in a climate-controlled vault across town. But I wasn't done yet. I needed proof of the conspiracy. Solid proof. That night, I returned to the office. I knew Graham's laptop password. He always used the same, Victory 88, a cocky homage to his favorite number in high school jersey. He wasn't just predictable, he was arrogant, and arrogance makes mistakes. I logged in and searched for anything with Ilona in it. Bingo. A folder titled Merit Holdings, Exit Plan. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, call logs. In one email, Ilona wrote, "Once the signature is in, file immediately. She has no legal training, she won't see the trap. If this works, we'll have enough to spin the divorce in our favor." Divorce! So that was it. Graham wasn't just moving money. He was planning to leave me the moment I signed those papers. And Ilona? She wasn't just some consultant. She was helping him build the exit ramp, and she wanted a cut of the wreckage. The next morning, Graham returned from his jog and asked, "Did you get a chance to look at those papers?" I met his gaze with the most neutral expression I could muster. "I did, and I want to run them by Clarabelle." The way his eyes narrowed, just for a split second, told me everything I needed. He didn't expect resistance. He didn't plan for a woman who would quietly dismantle his entire plan before he got the chance to execute it. But I wasn't done. I had Clarabelle schedule an official notarization appointment. For my signature, I told Graham. He smiled, satisfied, thinking I was giving in. But what I was really signing that day, a final amendment to my trust. One that would place every asset beyond his reach. Permanently. That night, he poured me a glass of wine and offered a toast. "To our future," he said smoothly. I raised my glass and smiled faintly. "To your surprise." He blinked, puzzled. "What?" "Nothing," I replied, sipping. In truth, I was counting the days. Because once he realized I wasn't signing his trap, his entire plan would fall apart. It was a calm Friday morning, the kind that dares you to believe everything is normal. Graham had already showered and shaved, his cologne wafting through the hallway like the scent of someone too smug to know they're about to lose. He greeted me with a cup of coffee, black, just the way I liked it. "I thought we could go over a few things today," he said as I stepped into the kitchen, trying not to flinch at his fake warmth. "Oh? Just some logistics. End of quarter stuff. Might be boring, but it's important." He had a folder in his hand, a navy blue leather portfolio, the kind he only used in client meetings or when he wanted to intimidate someone with a velvet glove. He set it on the breakfast table like it was nothing, just another morning task. But the moment it touched the wood, it might as well have exploded in front of me. "Take a look when you can," he said. "We should get it signed and squared away before Monday." I sat down across from him. My heartbeat was steady now. I had rehearsed this. "What is it?" I asked, casually flipping it open. "Oh, just a realignment of a few things," he said, pouring himself more coffee. "Making sure everything's protected. Assets, accounts, the condo. You know, just in case something ever happens." I skimmed the first few pages. Legal jargon dressed in soft language. For convenience, for protection, for the future. Then I reached the section I was looking for. Full transfer of real estate equity into Wilder Holdings, LLC. Authorization to reallocate retirement funds into marital trust. Sole trustee, Graham Wilder. Power of attorney for financial decisions. Revocable only with written consent of both parties. My name was there in print, a signature line waiting for me. He was trying to take everything, not just now, forever. I slowly closed the folder and looked up. "Graham," I said, voice calm, "what is this?" He smiled the way someone smiles when they think you've already lost. "It's just a precaution, Marina. You know how crazy things can get when people aren't on the same page financially. This way, everything's streamlined, safe. Streamlined, I repeated. Like transferring all of my accounts to a company you control? He chuckled like I had misunderstood. You're making this sound worse than it is. Look, nothing changes between us. It's just paperwork. I studied him, the way his left hand tapped on the mug, the flicker in his eye when I didn't smile back. And if I don't sign it? I asked, placing the folder down slowly. His smile thinned, just slightly. Well, he leaned forward, folding his hands. I think you should. We've always trusted each other, right? I didn't blink. And if I still say no? His voice dropped a tone. His smile died. He leaned in just a little further and said slowly, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Marina." There it was. Not a request, not concern, a warning dressed up in familiarity. I stared at him for a long beat. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I reached across the table and gently touched the folder. Then I stood up. "You know what, Graham?" I said lightly. "You're right. I do need to think about it." He blinked, clearly thrown off. "I'll sleep on it," I added, already walking toward the kitchen counter. He watched me, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he masked it again. I placed the folder neatly beside the toaster and turned back to him with a faint smile. "Anything else?" He hesitated. "No, that's all for now." I nodded and left the room. That afternoon, I made another call to Clarabelle. "He gave you the papers?" she asked. "He did. And?" I could hear the satisfaction in her voice even before I answered. "I didn't sign." "Good," she said crisply. "We're in the home stretch. I filed the final amendment to the trust this morning. By Monday, everything will be permanently untouchable." "What about the power of attorney? Already nullified. He just doesn't know it yet." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For a brief moment, the fear started to fade, but it wasn't gone. Because Graham hadn't made his real move yet, and I knew once he realized his trap wouldn't work, he'd stop playing polite. That night, he cooked dinner: pan-seared salmon, asparagus with lemon zest, a bottle of overpriced French wine I didn't remember buying. He set the table like it was a holiday. He was putting on a show. I played my part. "Did you look through the documents?" he asked casually over dinner. I skimmed. "And?" "They're a bit dense," I said, slicing through the fish. "I'll have to read them again when I'm more alert." He laughed. Maybe I should have had Ilona draft something simpler. I froze for just a second. He realized it too late. He had slipped. "Ilona?" I asked, tilting my head. "Oh, just someone at the firm. She helps with the legal stuff, of course." I smiled and toasted my wine glass against his. Inside, I whispered, "You're so close to the edge and you don't even know it." Later, while we watched TV, he left the room to shower. I stayed on the couch, watching his phone like a hawk. A notification lit up. Another message from Ilona Merritt. "Is she signing or not? We need this done before the 25th. That was all I needed. Proof." Chathamiam. The next morning, I printed the message screenshot, attached it to the fake asset transfer documents, and placed them inside my private lockbox at Clarabelle's office. By the time Graham came down for coffee, I was already dressed, smiling, and making scrambled eggs. He leaned against the counter, casual. "So, did you sleep on it?" I flipped the eggs and said without turning, "Yes, and I've made up my mind." He grinned. "And?" I slid the eggs onto the plate, looked him square in the eyes, and replied, "I'm not signing a damn thing." The silence that followed was delicious. Graham stared at me, stunned for half a second, then covered it with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're overthinking this." "Maybe," I said, taking a bite of toast. "But I'd rather overthink than hand over my life." He didn't say anything else that morning, but I knew what was coming. The nice mask was gone, the war was about to begin, and I was ready for it. Sunday mornings in Savannah had always felt sacred to me. The air was quieter, the streets slower. The Spanish moss seemed to hang a little softer from the trees, and the city held its breath like it was waiting for something gentle to happen. But not that morning. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of Earl Grey, watching the steam spiral upward like smoke signals from a distant battlefield. The storm was coming. I could feel it in my spine. And when Graham walked in, crisp button-down shirt half tucked into his slacks, mug in hand, I knew today was the day he'd try to detonate everything. He didn't sit. He stood across the table from me and stared for a long moment, like he was measuring how much of me he'd have to break to win. "We need to talk," he said flatly. I sipped my tea. "Do we?" He exhaled like this was difficult for him, like he was the victim. "This isn't working," he said. I tilted my head. "What isn't?" "This. Us. The marriage. It hasn't been for a long time. You know that." I let the words hang in the air. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. I let him feel the weight of his rehearsed monologue. He continued, more confident now. "I've been thinking about this for months. I think we should separate. I want a clean break. No drama." There it was, the line he'd probably practiced in the mirror. So noble, so reasonable, a clean break. I set my cup down, folded my hands, and stared at him. "You've been thinking about this for months," I repeated slowly. He nodded, clearly relieved that I wasn't shouting. "Yes, I think we've grown apart." "Grown apart," I echoed. "Right, that's what you're calling it." His jaw tightened just a little. "So what now?" I asked. "You leave? We split everything 50-50? Graham straightened. "That would be the fair thing to do." I smiled. "Not the sweet kind, the dangerous kind." "Interesting," I said. "Because you didn't seem too interested in fairness when you tried to make me sign over everything last week." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp. "And Ilona? Is she part of the clean break? Or does she come in after the dust settles?" He froze. That was the moment he knew, I knew. And then I said the words that would ruin his script forever. "You're too late, Graham. I already moved my assets." His entire body locked up. It was subtle, but I knew him too well. The flick of his eye, the twitch in his jaw, the way his thumb tapped once against the ceramic mug. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice too casual. I sat back, crossed my legs, and smiled wider. "Exactly what it sounds like. Everything's been moved. Condos, savings, accounts, every last penny. All protected, all outside your reach." His eyes narrowed. "When?" I tilted my head. "About a week before you handed me that nice little folder." Silence. Heavy. Electric. Then, "You think this is a game?" "No," I said. "You do, and you just lost." He slammed his hand on the table so hard my tea sloshed in the cup. "You're lying," he growled. "I didn't even blink. Try me." He paced, rubbing the back of his neck. The mask was off now. I could see the real Graham. Furious, cornered, unraveling. "This isn't over, Marina," he said, voice like ice. "You think you're clever, but you have no idea what you've started." "Funny," I said, rising from the table. "I was just thinking the same thing." That evening, I stood by the bay window in the living room, watching the sky turn the color of bruised plums. Graham had locked himself in the office for hours. He didn't even join me for dinner. When he finally emerged, he didn't say a word. Just handed me a thick white envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I opened it anyway. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Inside were a stack of neatly typed demands. Half of our condo. 50% of our shared assets. Full claim to the brokerage accounts. Spousal support. I laughed, out loud. "Are you serious?" Graham crossed his arms. "You left me no choice." "Oh, please." I snapped the file shut. "You were going to file anyway. You just didn't expect me to beat you to the punch. You're going to regret this, Marina," he said. "No, Graham," I said, eyes locked to his. "You're going to regret underestimating me." The next morning, I was at Clarabelle's office by 8:30 a.m. She flipped through the divorce filing, shaking her head with a crooked grin. "This is adorable," she said. "He thinks he has a shot. He wants spousal support. Clarabelle snorted. With his income? She set the file down and looked at me. Everything's already in the trust. He can fight all he wants, but legally, he has no access. And I'll make sure he pays for trying. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of light. Not just because I had outmaneuvered him, but because he finally knew it. That night, Graham came home late. Shirt untucked, tie undone, stubble creeping across his jaw. He walked past me like I didn't exist. I let him. Because silence was its own kind of power now. But before he reached the stairs, I said softly, "By the way, tell Ilona thanks for the outline. It made hiding everything so much easier." He stopped mid-step, didn't turn, didn't speak. Then he kept walking. The first sign was the silence. Not the kind that fills a home after a fight. This was different. It was the kind that stretched beyond walls, across phone lines, through inboxes and unreturned texts. Suddenly, people weren't calling me back. Emails I sent to professional contacts were met with vague replies or none at all. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then Rachel called. She had been my assistant 3 years ago, back when I managed financial logistics for a luxury development firm before I stepped back to focus on home life. We'd stayed friendly, Christmas cards, the occasional lunch. But today her voice was tight. "Hey Marina, look, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but people are talking." "Talking?" She hesitated. "There's a rumor going around about the divorce, about you taking money." My stomach dropped. "What kind of money?" "They're saying you siphoned from your joint accounts, that you hid assets. Some even say you might have laundered funds." "Laundered funds?" I sat down, hard. "Who's saying this?" I asked, though I already knew. Rachel's answer came like a confirmation stamp. "Graham's been meeting with people, mutual friends, even some of your old clients." I didn't want to believe it, but he's spreading it, Marina, like wildfire. When I got to Clarabelle's office, I didn't knock. I dropped a folder of printed social media screenshots onto her desk. Facebook comments, LinkedIn whispers. One thread from an anonymous legal gossip forum claiming I had misused joint accounts and vanished money prior to filing. Clarabelle didn't even blink. "Well," she said, flipping through the pages, "he's officially scared." "He's trying to destroy me," I said, "and I haven't even done anything." "That's where he's wrong." Clarabelle leaned back in her chair. "You did do something. You beat him. Now he's lashing out because it's the only thing left in his arsenal. So what do we do?" She pulled a thick envelope from her drawer and tapped it. "We start here. Cease and desist. A formal legal warning to stop all defamatory speech. If he ignores it, we file." I stared at the papers. "I don't want a prolonged war." Clarabelle nodded. "Then don't give him one. Give him a reckoning." That night I saw him. Not at home. I hadn't stepped foot back inside since the petition arrived. I'd been staying at a friend's place in the historic district. High ceilings, crown molding, and blessed distance from his poisoned presence. No. I saw him at Lorenzo's, one of Savannah's most exclusive restaurants. He was seated at a booth near the back, laughing with two lawyers I recognized from city litigation gossip, men who loved the sound of their own voices and the smell of expensive scotch. He didn't see me walk in. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream. I simply walked up to his table, leaned in, and whispered into his ear, "You have no idea what you've just started, Graham." His laugh faltered. He turned to face me with a smirk, but there was a flicker of unease behind his eyes. "Let's see what you've got, then," he said smoothly. I smiled, but my eyes didn't. "Oh, you will." By Monday, the cease and desist was delivered. By Wednesday, his lawyers had called Clarabelle trying to negotiate tone. But Graham? Graham doubled down. He knew his defamation would get him sued, so he took it one step further. On Thursday, Clarabelle called me at 7:00 a.m. sharp. "You need to come in, now." "What happened?" "He just filed a motion for a financial audit." My spine snapped straight. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming you mishandled joint funds and falsified account records. He submitted spreadsheets." "Evidence." I was already grabbing my keys. Are they real? There was a pause. No, but they're good, which means someone forged them, and I have a guess who. Ilona. When I got to the office, Clarabelle was already pacing. She had the documents spread out across the glass table in the conference room. We had Beatrice, our forensic contact, look at them. She pointed to a string of transactions. They're doctored. The timestamps don't match real system logs. And here, this is the best part. She flipped to a second sheet. These transactions are supposedly from 6 months ago, right? Look at the account numbers. I scanned them. They looked ordinary. Then Clarabelle pointed again. That account didn't exist until 3 months ago. My jaw dropped. They forged entries using accounts that hadn't even been opened yet? Exactly. We stared at each other. Then Clarabelle broke into a grin. That's the mistake that buries them. That night, I returned to my temporary apartment and finally let myself exhale. I stood on the balcony with a glass of water, staring out at the Savannah skyline, glowing gold and blue in the misty spring air. Graham had tried everything. He'd come for my money, he'd come for my dignity, and now he'd tried to come for my reputation. But what he didn't know, what he'd never understood, was that I never needed to scream to win. I just needed to document, to wait, to let him build his own noose. And now, thanks to one lazy mistake, one forged spreadsheet tied to a non-existent account, that noose was tightening. The courthouse smelled like polished wood, printer ink, and nerves. It wasn't our first hearing, but this one felt different. This time, I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to expose a fraud. And that fraud had a name. 2, actually. Graham Wilder, Ilona Merritt. They walked in 10 minutes late. Graham in a perfectly pressed navy suit, Ilona in an expensive pencil skirt and a smug expression like she was here to accept an award. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. I had something better than anger, proof. Clarabelle sat beside me, calm and razor sharp. Her tablet glowed with files, tabs open, evidence lined up like bullets. You ready? She whispered without looking away from her screen. I nodded. She smirked. Good, because they're about to choke on their own lies. The opposing counsel, some thin, humorless man named Roland Beck, stood first. Your Honor, he began, we're here today because my client, Mr. Wilder, has reason to believe Mrs. Quinn has intentionally misrepresented financial data in an attempt to shield assets during divorce proceedings. He held up a folder. These spreadsheets detail suspicious transfers and shell accounts that were hidden from joint disclosure. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a sharp stare, took the file without a word. Roland continued, emboldened, we request a full forensic audit of Mrs. Quinn's financial activities for the last 12 months, and temporary hold on all marital property until the investigation concludes. Clarabelle stood. No drama, no raised voice, just precision. Your Honor, we expected this motion, and we've come prepared. She placed a much thicker binder on the judge's bench. These spreadsheets, she said, are forged. They list account numbers that did not exist at the time the alleged transactions occurred. Our team has consulted a certified forensic analyst who will testify today. The documents submitted by Mr. Wilder's team are fraudulent, and we have evidence that Ms. Ilona Merritt was directly involved in creating them. There was a low murmur across the courtroom. Ilona shifted in her seat. Graham didn't move. Clarabelle stepped aside as our forensic analyst, Beatrice North, took the stand. She was middle-aged, blunt, and terrifyingly efficient. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out exactly how the numbers were manipulated. Inconsistent metadata. Timestamps fabricated via Excel macros. Transactions assigned to account numbers not yet created at the time. Simply put, Beatrice said, this is a clumsy but deliberate attempt at financial deception. And I'd bet my certification it wasn't done by Marina Quinn. Jackie! When she finished, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear a throat clear 3 rows back. Clarabelle returned to the bench with one final blow. We're filing for an immediate dismissal of Mr. Wilder's audit request, and, more importantly, a counterclaim for defamation and submission of falsified legal evidence. She turned and looked directly at Graham for the first time all day. and we will be pursuing full damages.
Chapter 10.
The judge didn't even need a recess. She spoke slowly but clearly. The court finds no credible basis for Mr. Wilder's claims. The motion for audit is denied. Furthermore, due to the submission of potentially falsified evidence, Mr. Wilder will be responsible for all legal costs associated with this motion. Her gavel came down with a crack like thunder. Bang! Just like that, Graham lost.
Chapter.
As we stood to leave, Graham brushed past me, but not before muttering under his breath, "You think this is over? Just wait." I didn't even turn. I just said softly, "You should have quit while you were behind." Clarabelle caught up with me on the courthouse steps. "Well," she said, "that was satisfying." I exhaled slowly. "That was justice." "No," she corrected, eyes gleaming. "That was just the warm-up. Wait until we hit them with the actual lawsuit." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. We have enough to bury them. Defamation, malicious prosecution, evidence tampering. If we push this, we could ruin both their careers." For a moment, I hesitated. I'd already won. Wasn't that enough? Then I remembered how I had sat in my apartment alone, crying while my name was dragged through mud, how I had almost lost clients, friendships, even my own sanity because of them. They weren't just trying to take my money, they were trying to erase me, and I wouldn't let them. I nodded. Let's bury them. 2 weeks later, I stood once again in the same courtroom. But this time, everything felt different. There was no fear, no dread, just focus. Clarabelle stood beside me in a tailored navy pantsuit, flipping through her binder like a woman sharpening her sword. Across the aisle sat Graham and Ilona. She was pale, he was stony. Both dressed to impress, but their eyes told a different story. They knew they had already lost. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth. It was about consequences. And they were here to collect theirs. The hearing began with Clarabelle calmly laying out the counterclaim. Defamation of character. Submission of knowingly falsified legal evidence. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. She moved with precision, presenting receipts, forensic reports, and sworn affidavits. Then came the final blow. Clarabelle handed the judge one last folder. "Your Honor, this is a notarized timeline showing when each account referenced in Mr. Wilder's false documentation was actually created. As the court can see, several accounts he cited did not exist at the time the transfers supposedly took place." She looked directly at Graham. This was not a mistake. This was a coordinated effort to manipulate the court. Ilona looked away. Graham's jaw clenched. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Each page she turned sounded like a nail in their professional coffins. When she looked up, her voice was firm. "The court finds in favor of Mrs. Marina Quinn on all counts." I closed my eyes. Just for a second. Mr. Wilder and Ms. Merritt will be held liable for all legal fees incurred by Mrs. Quinn. Furthermore, the court awards additional damages for reputational harm and emotional duress. Her gavel came down one final time. Bang. And just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, the sun was out for the first time in weeks. Clarabelle squeezed my hand. "You good?" I nodded, the wind catching strands of my hair. Graham passed us, eyes straight ahead, Ilona a step behind him. He didn't look at me. I didn't need him to. He was done. Not just legally, but socially, professionally, and morally. There would be no rebuilding after this. Not for a man who bet his life on my silence and lost. 2 days later, I signed the final documents. The judgment was complete. All claims against me dismissed. All false accusations formally discredited. Graham? Got nothing. No condo, no spousal support, no credibility. Claribel watched me read through the final line, then slid over a glass of champagne. "How's that for closure?" I smiled. "For real this time. I didn't just win a case," I said. "I took my life back." She raised her glass. "To peace." That night, back in my own home, the one he tried to steal from me, I lit a single candle in the living room and sat down with my laptop. I opened a blank document. No more depositions, no more threats. No more looking over my shoulder. Just white space. A new beginning. I titled it, "Rebuilding After Betrayal," and I started writing. Not for a judge, not for Graham, for me.
See. Mapped.
Reflection. When betrayal comes from someone we trusted most, it shatters more than our hearts. It threatens our identity. But real strength isn't measured by how loud we shout or how hard we hit back. It's in the quiet choices, the paper trail we document, the patience to wait, the wisdom to act when the time is right. Marina didn't just survive her husband's deception, she dismantled it with precision, grace, and courage. In doing so, she reclaimed more than her assets. She reclaimed herself. Let this story remind you, no matter how calculated the betrayal, your clarity, your truth, and your resolve are always more powerful than their lies.